Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Matt Baer. I'm the founder of Q4Launch, and we are excited you guys are along for the ride with us today. No matter where you are tuning in from, we've got people tuning in from all over the world on today's webinar, which we're excited about seeing so many of you. This is a great webinar. I know many of our customers kind of count on this information as a way to learn what they may have missed at RezFest if they weren't there. I'm sure many of you use it for that same purpose, as well as what you might have not heard. You know, maybe you were at RezFest. I know there's a lot of people on today's webinar that I saw at RezFest last week or the week before. Time flies, but maybe just kind of looking for an interesting perspective. So hopefully we'll share that with you today. Definitely some interesting things we're going to talk about, a little bit of which we previewed for you in the emails going out. If this is your first time with us on one of our webinars, we're glad you're here as well. We teach about 2 webinars a month just to educate the industry, share our thoughts and perspectives, share data on how we see things going in the industry, and teach a lot of how-to style content as well that you can take and apply in your own marketing strategies based off real-life success that we're having with our customers. So we hope you find that helpful. We hope you find today's webinar content helpful as well. And stay tuned for one we're doing 2 weeks from today on how to develop your 2020 marketing budget, your 2020 marketing budget, which is crazy to say. I remember blasting off a ton of fireworks and my dad being an IT consultant when it turned to year 2000 and we thought all the computers were going to shut down and break. And here we are staring down 2020. It's crazy. But you'll want to tune into that. We're going to talk a lot about budgeting for the new year and how to do that effectively in today's increasingly competitive marketplace. And let's be very clear about that. We're facing more competition as hospitality managers, as vacation managers, as hoteliers, as innkeepers than we've ever faced before. And then the landscape has changed dramatically this year. So we'll talk about that on that webinar too. So make sure not to miss that. That sign up page is already live, so you can follow the link you got to register for this and sign up for that webinar 2 weeks from today. A little bit about Q4Launch for those of you that are with us for the first time as well. We are a hospitality marketing agency. We specialize in putting heads in beds for those 3 categories I just spoke to: vacation managers, hoteliers, and innkeepers. That is all we do. We focus on the digital marketing side, building websites that convert traffic into leads, and then bookings and driving traffic to those websites as well to really create a holistic marketing solution for our customers and work together to grow their direct bookings. So if that's something that is on your radar as you're planning your 2020, we'd love to talk to you about that as well. My contact information is there on the screen, as well as somebody mentioned in the chat panel, my huge picture is also there on the screen. Fortunately, that was about 4 years ago, and being that I have a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, I have aged significantly since that photo was taken. I know I'll see many of you at VRMA next week, and I'll look forward to seeing you there too. So it's one of the reasons that we put my picture up there so you can recognize me at conferences. Come say hi, tell me what you've learned from our webinars, maybe what you hated from our webinars, and how we can make them better, because that's what we strive to do every day, and that's get better. So with that, let's dive into our content today and touch on some various things as we move throughout our time together here. So, yeah, here we go. First of all, we were headed into RezFest. I was headed into RezFest. Many of our customers, many of you, because many of you were emailing me, headed into RezFest asking for my opinion on things. But we're headed into RezFest this year with lots of questions. Questions around the sunsetting of V12. Questions around, we heard many of you emailed us telling that they were calling on Verbo, HomeAway, was calling and offering free registrations to the conference. Rumors of low attendance at the conference and whispers of a big announcement of the conference. And we're going to cover all of those topics today because we feel like we have answers to all of those topics and do that and help create some clarity around those things. For many of you who are there, you can share in the chat panel your opinion on some of those questions, and I'd love to share the opinion in the chat panel with other people who are attending, or any thoughts you have related to those things. And then I'm going to share, I got to design the slides, so I'm going to share my thoughts, some facts, and some opinions with you throughout our time together today. And I'll do my best to distinguish between those things, thoughts, opinions, and facts as well for you, so you can kind of understand the differences there. But there was a lot going on, a lot of questions. We didn't know, as a partner of Verbo's, we're a HomeAway software partner, which is now Verbo software. we're a Verbo software partner, but we hope, that they have a great conference every year. And a big shout out to those of you who know Alexandra, who puts together their conference and plans the parties, and they put on probably one of the best conferences anybody puts on, not just from a food perspective and will there be bacon at breakfast, although that was such a hot topic last year, but just from an overall hospitality perspective. She does such a great job putting on a great conference, and the entire leadership team really thinks through their content, and it builds on itself really, really well. So we're always impressed with their conference, but always hope that they have a great conference so that we can benefit from it by attracting a lot of people there. And obviously we spend money to be a part of that. So we have some vested interest in the success of the conference. None of that will sway what we tell you today from sharing our actual thoughts with you. But on a positive note about things, the tone seems to have changed, at least in my opinion. If you've been at conferences in the last few years, or you've tuned into many of the calls or things, it seems like, they've kind of been trying hard to not be the 800-pound gorilla in the industry and to really listen and to take steps in that direction. I think they've said that, but haven't actually lived up to that in a lot of ways in recent years. And I think, at least the vibe that I got from the conference and some of the things that they were rolling out from a leadership perspective made me think, and hopefully made me really believe, that the tone, it seems to be changing. That they, through some of the decisions that have been made over the last year, many of things which upset the industry and had huge outcries in the industry, hopefully they claim they've had a wake-up call on some of those things. And it's not just about, traveling around and doing the rally speech, but hopefully they're actually listening in a new and unique way. One of the things that we think as an organization is so important is listening. Yet it's something that most people are really, really bad at. If you think about your own behavior and interpersonal relationships you have, listening is really, really hard to do. And we hope that the talk that they made and the efforts that they say they're making around listening more will come to fruition. They also shared some of the results of their Rise and Shines. The Rise and Shines was an initiative launched by them to essentially listen more, but to get their staff and their executive team out in the field, meeting with you to be able to listen more. And they, at last year's conference, announced kind of a new team that they were forming to be able to essentially be the champion for the vacation rental manager inside of Verbo, and that Verbo was going to be the champion for the vacation rental managers inside of the Expedia group. But hopefully that's happening. So we're going to kind of talk about some of the results of Rise and Shines throughout our time together, because many of those things impact the rest of the content. But some of the things they specifically called out to were the request from vacation rental managers to supercharge the partnership. That was a big thing. They kind of define that in some different ways we'll dive into. But obviously, next one there, drive high quality bookings. And I will say they spent a lot of time, not necessarily on stage, but there seems to be a consistent message around that specifically, high quality bookings. And that seems to be an area of differentiation that they're really trying to strive to drive between them and Airbnb. That they want to paint this picture that Airbnb bookings are a lower quality guest, a lower quality booking, a more discount oriented, a more last minute booking. And you can answer that for yourself. If you're listed on Airbnb or you're listed on Verbo, you may have some personal experience with that. I will say from our customers' feedback that seems to be somewhat true, that we hear that more often than we hear the opposite of it. And of course, that's not going to be true in every situation, but that there does seem to be a higher quality of guest coming through that platform. So you can experiment with that. I'm sure that's different market by market, but that's an area that it seems they're really trying to differentiate themselves between Verbo and Airbnb. And then to provide new tools, data, and services. And this is an area that they spend a lot of time talking about and that we're going to spend a lot of our time today touching base on, and ultimately hoping that that's true, that the tone has changed, that things are going to calm down a little bit from a change perspective. They talked about the fact that they know people want to hear about change further in advance and have more time to adapt their business to the changes that are being made as well. And hopefully they will live up to the promises they've made around those things. So that, I think, started things off in a good direction. As a brander, as a marketer, there was a early discussion as well, led by one of their team members, on the discussion of the Verbo brand. Sorry, I still struggle with that, but the Verbo brand decision. The decision to pronounce it Verbo versus the acronym of VRBO, which I think many of us are still adapting to. They talked about that quite a bit. One of the things that they found, and this was more about Verbo versus HomeAway, but the Verbo brand tested much stronger with consumers in terms of trust and memorability than the HomeAway brand did. It was also, and this was cited by, I believe, this was mentioned in Amy Hinote's article regarding this back, I believe, in March, but she was citing Forbes or one of the other publications, but part of a larger shift in earning revenue from travelers, not just property managers. So shifting more towards a traveler-focused brand, not just a property manager-focused brand. Also moving away from what the acronym stood for. So historically, the acronym has stood for Vacation Rentals by Owner, right? We all know that. But if you really look at who they are as a company, that's not really what they're about anymore. I mean, it's still part of it, and there's still a tremendous amount of listings on their platform that are true vacation rentals by owner, but they are so much more than that as a brand. So I think even moving away from VRBO and moving to Verbo is one way of keeping that brand recognition, but in a big way, moving away from what the acronym historically has stood for. And then another part of it, as far as Verbo.com versus HomeAway.com, Verbo.com was and is outperforming HomeAway.com by over 3x as we look at traffic, which of course, they don't share data on each of these things with us necessarily, but we can see traffic data and we can see keyword ranking data that's publicly available. And we can see that the Verbo.com outperforms HomeAway.com by a factor of over 3x. And I don't, we're not going to see HomeAway.com go away right away. It still gets millions of visits every month. So you have a site getting millions of visits. You don't just shut it down overnight. You have a strategy over a period of time, most likely, to be able to scale that down, but that's not going to go away overnight. And it's going to be a transition. You think about how many places that brand appears as a, HomeAway as a brand appears. There's a tremendous amount of things that have to change, and that's going to take a long time to get that done. Also, some discussion around the decision to sunset V12. And this is a really important topic in the industry. We have many V12 customers, and we have many Escapia customers as well. First of all, let me say, for those of you that are our customers and you're on V12 and you're on today's webinar, we have made the decision that we are going to migrate whatever PMS that you use or whatever PMS you decide to use going forward. If you're our customer and if you're on our future-proof website platform, we will migrate your PMS to the new PMS you're going to choose on our future-proof platform for no charge. Meaning whenever you decide, hey, I'm switching from V12 to X, let us know when it's live and we're ready to pull properties in from that new one. We will make that change for you at no charge. We've heard, really frustrated people in the marketplace who aren't our customers who are getting told they're going to be spending anywhere from $8,000 to $15,000 just to switch their websites from a property management system perspective. Unfortunately for us, we knew that was not the V12 was going to sunset, but we knew our customers would change PMSs from time to time. So we built our future-proof platform in that in mind. And whereas it might take somebody else, 50, 75, 100 hours to make that change for you, it takes us about 5 hours. And as a good partner, we're going to eat that cost for you to help you transition. So, and the same would be true if you're not one of our customers on our future-proof platform. Contact us today. We'd love to talk to you about what that looks like and how we can help you in that transition process, make a smooth transition from V12 to whatever you decide to go to. So that's just a little bit of information for our customers who are on today's webinar. And if you're not our customer, how we might be able to help you if you're a V12 customer. But back to the matter at hand and the discussion of decision to sunset V12. This was talked a good bit about, and more so in closed door sessions that we weren't able to attend. But Verbo is committed to the future of Escapia. So that was a question I have personally raised on webinars in the past: is are they committed to the future of their software business? All of the talk that really came out years ago, not tons, but a few years ago, when Expedia acquired HomeAway, was related to the platform part of their offering, and it was obvious Expedia is a platform business, and that's what they were really buying. That's where the majority of revenue comes from. That's what makes the most sense. At the same time, since then, we have seen them shut down many software offerings that existed inside of HomeAway software. So it left us with some questions as far as, okay, they're shutting down other software platforms. What are they going to do with V12 and Escapia? I think this is good news for all of those of you who use HomeAway software. And I'm not surprised by it, but I wouldn't have been surprised no matter which way it went either, as far as their decision. Had they gotten out of the software business altogether, or had they decided to stay in it but to consolidate the platform? And I think strategically, while it's a difficult and an unpopular decision if you're a V12 customer, it's probably a really good strategic decision for them. And one of the reasons behind that, and one of the reasons John Kim talked about, was they've essentially been dividing resources amongst their 3 platforms. So every time they want to do something, every time they want to add a new feature, they have to do it 3 times, and they have to build it 3 times, which means they get significantly less done than they could. But by combining those resources, they're going to be able to take Escapia further, faster than they otherwise would. And if they didn't make this strategic move, we saw how fast they were falling behind other property management software in the industry. We see it on our side as we use the software on behalf of our customers. But we saw how fast their software was falling behind the rest of the industry. And it's because they were trying to push so much forward all at once and have this platform to push it forward all at once, and resources were being divided. I think this will help them close that gap. And we got several kind of screenshot views of the new Escapia within some presentations they made. And I think the new interface of Escapia, which we'll talk a little bit about, we're really encouraged about the new graphical interface that lays over top of Escapia, new features that are going to come with that. So if you're a V12 user, there are a lot of great options out there, but would definitely encourage you to check out the Escapia side of what they're looking at. I will say the majority of our customers who use Escapia are very happy with it. Of course, it has its own, glitches here and there and support issues here and there, but we'll speak to those things today as well. So lots of change happening in the industry, which is a constant theme for things, no doubt. So let's talk a little bit more about Escapia. They also debuted the new Escapia. Now, this wasn't a debut we were able to be a part of because it was mostly debuted in closed-door sessions. And they policed those closed-door sessions very closely, and then the whole day was held after the conference for software users as well. But they did debut some new user interface, which we're excited about. Our staff will feel good about that. Our staff, as I'm sure your staff, if you're an Escapia user, the Escapia user interface is just a bit dated. They also talked about some more features they're going to be rolling in there. Specifically, one they touted a lot was Market Maker will be integrated directly within Escapia, as opposed to being something in the Verbo platform you have to use on the platform. Be built right into Escapia for you. Also promised that it would be faster, that they would be investing more into support, which we're very excited about because getting customers better support on Escapia will make everyone's life better. And then they're committed to supercharging the partnership. Didn't unroll really what that means, but that they will be supercharging your partnership with Escapia, whatever that looks like. But good to hear they're committed to the future of the product. Good to hear the things that they're working on to make that product better. And anyone who sat in the closed door session who wants to share any feedback that they're able to share with the greater group, feel free to drop that in the chat panel. And we will do our best to share that with you as it comes in. So overall, though, I will say, while it was shocking news to all of us when V12 was announced it would be sunsetted, we do feel good about where they're headed from a product perspective, and believe they have a tremendous amount of data to create a really good product. They also announced lots of new features for Verbo.com. I'm only going to be able to touch on a few of these. I'm going to touch on all of them, but not in great detail or depth, just because of how much information there was. I mean, this in and of itself was almost an hour-long presentation that I'm trying to summarize here on one slide. But I believe it was last year they announced they were rolling out trip boards, and they shared some data on that tripboard users are 4 times more likely to book, which makes sense, right? If you're going to go through the process of making a trip board, you probably have a higher propensity to book in the first place. But the stats are stats, that they're averaging about 2 million boards created each month. So that's a strong statistic. And then they're also expanding on that, adding group chat functionality, the ability to look up and map activities near where you're going to stay. Excuse my typo there. That's supposed to say polls. It says pools. When you're working in the vacation rental space, everything is about pools. So excuse my typo, but polls, so that you can actually poll people who are taking the trip with you on, do you want to go to this restaurant or that restaurant? And you can do a poll right there within the trip board. And then the ability to build custom itineraries. And I can't remember if it was within this space or within another part of their product, but also having the ability to integrate tour purchases and Amazon shopping. And if you look at that, the tour purchases part, and I don't know exactly how far this one was out, but tour purchases will, seems like, would have a direct feed from the Expedia side of their business and be able to monetize that more. Time will tell on whether or not, if there's any revenue share available to the vacation manager on that, or if it's just, they book your property and then Vrbo has a chance to sell them tours as well. As we know, Airbnb is already doing with their experiences. So I'm playing off of that a little bit. And then integrating Amazon shopping into it to be able to buy supplies for your upcoming trips. Yes, and I do see the call out in the chat panel on the typo. Thank you. Got it, covered it. Polls instead of pools. Definitely there. Thank you, though. And then expanding the virtual assistant. This was an area that they talked a lot about. I kind of left it out of my session because I didn't feel like it was necessarily as clearly relevant. They spent a lot of time talking about AI, and John Kim specifically gave a presentation on AI, the superhero or the supervillain, and he talked about technology advancements and a lot of things. It was a great talk and well put together. But they're expanding their virtual assistant and using that to collect signals to provide actionable insights and recommendations. So using the information they're gathering via the virtual assistant to better understand who a user is and then serve up properties that match that user persona, if you will. Very, very specifically properties that just match that person and the type of properties they tend to be looking for. They're also expanding on the translations available. I think this is an area we heard a lot of conversation about, and that was the translation piece of things. And if you look at where they are as in a strategic position, they're getting beat significantly in the greater overseas market by Airbnb. So outside of the United States, HomeAway, I believe, you'll have to fact check this with some actual market share stats, but if I remember stats correctly, Airbnb beats Vrbo outside of the United States by much more significant margin than they're beating them inside the United States. So expanding on translations available will be part of a long-term strategic plan to grow in other countries. And we love those bookings from other countries because they tend to be longer stays. And longer stays, more valuable stays, is definitely more valuable to us in the industry. Also expanding on Market Maker and making it available inside of Escapia, but also via partner API integrations. So we don't know a ton of information about what all that's going to look like, but expanding on that product. They're rolling out Boost to more property managers. So many of you may have experimented with Boost already. I've talked to several customers that have experimented with Boost already and had good success with it. A couple caveats on that. You must be a Premier partner, which I would imagine most of you, today on today's webinar are probably Premier partners or would qualify for that. And you have to have price consistency, which we will talk more about later on in today's webinar and was a big topic of conversation at the conference. But Boost is a great opportunity. Essentially what happens is you collect power-ups for accepted bookings, and then you're able to apply those power-ups to boost specific properties for specific dates in search results. So great way to be able to do that and either fill a cancellation that you have or fill a peak period at a really high rate. You want to be one of the top properties booked and command a high rate for that, or use it in off season or shoulder season just to get more visibility for products across your portfolio. They also released or talked about, I don't know exactly the timing on it, but a new listing feature. So essentially when you put a new listing up, it's really important to get those first few reviews on a new listing, and that they've seen getting those first few reviews helps that property launch successfully on the platform, and then the reviews and the bookings kind of roll in from there. But the first couple are always hard, right? Nobody wants to be the first one to book the property and see if it really is what it says it is. So a couple of things they've announced that they're doing to help that, and I think that their account managers are going to work specifically with the vacation managers to help make a reality. One is a new listing badge, so people can see, that the consumer can see, hey, it's okay that this property doesn't have any reviews, it's just that it's new. Makes a lot of sense, right? Just that new listing badge can give the consumer a little bit of peace of mind when they see zero reviews on the property. Also a higher rank in search results, helping it get started successfully and then a limited time 20% discount. They didn't share much detail on that. I don't know if that's going to be mandatory to participate in the rest of it, or if it's going to be optional, or if there's any variation on that discount, but that was something that they talked about. And then you'll see that bullet there too about the plans to integrate tour purchases and Amazon shopping into the platform, into the Vrbo platform as well. So lots of new things rolling out for Vrbo. Wish I had more time to talk about each of those things individually, but that gives you a high-level overview about some of the features that were discussed. And we're going to have a couple polls today as well. And this is one specifically that I want to poll our audience on today. So if you're tuned in and you're listening, get ready to answer a poll for me on this, just to get a feel for where you guys are in this. Because these stats, I guess, kind of surprised me a little bit. So they spoke to the goal to drive high quality bookings. Again, emphasis on high quality as part of their differentiation there. And what they claimed was, and I believe this claim was across the Expedia network. So I looked in my notes and I didn't write down the source, but I looked for information to verify it. And I believe it's across the Expedia network. But in the last year, they've gone from 625 average monthly visitors, 625 million average monthly visitors, and grown that to 750 million average monthly visits to their sites across the Expedia network. So tremendous amount of traffic, tremendous growth. And then they also claimed, and this was a little bit vague in the claim, so I don't know exactly where they were claiming and what they were attaching it to, but the way I took it was that the average property listed within had seen a 30% increase in bookings year over year. And I asked many of our customers at the conference, have you seen a 30% increase in bookings year over year? And the resounding answer that I got was no. But I would love to ask you guys that today as well, and we'll share the results of this poll live with everybody who is listening and who is tuned in. So the poll that's live on your screen, what change have you seen in your Vrbo bookings this year? Have you seen a 30% plus increase, so 30% or more? Have you seen a 0 to 30% increase in your bookings? Are you seeing it basically flat year over year, so no change? Are you seeing a 0 to 15% decrease in your Vrbo bookings this year? Or are you seeing a 15% plus decrease in your Vrbo bookings this year? So to make this data applicable, if we could get about 70% of people to vote in today's webinar, that would be hugely helpful. So I don't, maybe you don't know off the top of your head. If you don't know, maybe just put flat year over year. I probably should have put a do not know option on this, but if we could get you to vote one way or the other, that would be great. Or if you're not listed on Vrbo, maybe put that as well. I will say that BRMA is sharing some data from a recent study that they have done, and theirs shows the VRMA study, and I don't have that data in front of me, but they just sent an email out with it, and I saw Mike Copps, the executive director, speak at the Streamline conference a couple weeks ago as well and share some of the data, and I know they'll be sharing more of it at the VRMA conference next week, but their data surveying their members does not support this 30% increase in bookings. And if you think about it, it's a shocking statistic if it really is a 30% increase in bookings. And we've got about half the people voted in our poll here. And the result of that poll, I will say 0% of you have voted that you've seen 30% or more increase in bookings. 25% have said they saw a 0 to 30% increase. 40% say that they're flat year over year. 20% of respondents say they've seen a 0 to 15% decrease. And 15% say they've seen a 15% or more decrease in bookings. And that's changing a little bit. Looks like a couple more of you are voting there. But basically what that boils down to is 35% of you have seen a decrease, 30% of you have seen an increase, and 40% of you roughly have seen seen it be flat year over year. So interesting statistics. It's I guess 30% of you seeing an increase. That's probably good, generally speaking, but a shockingly strong statistic that they shared at the conference, and appreciate you all participating as we kind of learn and grow alongside each other. So we'll keep moving along here. This is something that I think is important and one of our important takeaways from the conference, and that's what's Vrbo asking of property managers. And I think the biggest ask that they had, the thing they spent the most time on, and we talked about this actually at last year's conference as well, so we know it's kind of a multi-year initiative for them, and that's to become price consistent. I think across the vacation rental industry, everyone has so many different ways they set up rates, different rate sets, different seasons, different schedules, different this, different that, and it's incredibly complex from a rates perspective within the industry. And I think that has created a lot of challenges for them. I think it's created way more challenges than they realize, right? Because Expedia bought HomeAway, and they're used to basically a hotel rate sheet, and you might have some discount codes, some group codes, some of those types of things, but hotel rates are pretty simple and easy to understand. Hotel fees are also pretty simple and easy to understand. You might have a Wi-Fi fee, you might have a resort fee, you might have a parking fee, but they're pretty simple, pretty easy to understand across the hotel industry and pretty standardized. But that's not the case in the vacational industry. And I think it has been much harder for Expedia to get Vrbo inventory live on Expedia than they anticipated. And I think that's why we're seeing this price consistency push. And many of the tools that they are building and making available are only available to people who are price consistent. So that's one of the levers they're using to kind of put the pressure on people to move into that place of price consistency. So many of our customers ask, what does it mean to be price consistent? And while I didn't have, an answer for you right off the rip, I will tell you that there are good answers for that at the Vrbo Discovery Hub. So we put a link to that there, vrbo.com/Discovery Hub. You can check that out, search for price consistency, and you'll find a lot of information there. On that, I read up on some of that in preparing for today's webinar as well. And it is going to be required to be distributed across the Expedia network because they have to be able to do that. They also, and I think it's on the Discovery Hub, but I think they also shared it in the presentation, that if the biggest challenge they're trying to solve for here is that when someone sees a price in search results and then they go to the booking screen and that price changes, they lose trust. Vrbo as a brand loses trust because that's who is essentially being represented, right? The Vrbo brand. The industry loses a little bit of trust and people will often bounce off. So what I believe it's on the Discovery Hub, there's a statistic that says 50% of people who see a price different on a property detail page than in search result will leave the page. So hard to know exactly where they're getting that statistic and how that compares to people who would have left the page anyways because they're just not going to move forward with the booking after they run an instant quote or whatever the thing is. We know there's a significant drop off in that step no matter what, but understanding the differences between a price consistent listing and what that drop off is and a non-price consistent listing and what that drop off is. But that big push, and you're probably going to hear it from your account manager, is to get to price consistency if you haven't heard it already from your account manager. They're also working with other PMSs to make this available on the Vrbo platform. So they have provided essentially some integration rules for this from an API perspective, and then the other property management software that are feeding properties to Vrbo are going to be able to make sure that they're setting properties up and feeding rates into Vrbo in a way that will help them maintain price consistency. And while I think that's generally good and will help with conversion and will help with everything else, I think it's just one more step towards getting where they ultimately want to be, which is a pay-per-performance, pay-per-booking style platform. I don't know why exactly it's such a struggle for them. I guess it's due to integrations and other things. We don't necessarily see that same struggle on the Airbnb side of things when we're talking to customers and seeing that, but it is interesting. We did have a question here in the chat panel from Keith. How can one be price consistent on Vrbo and maximize revenue on Expedia at the same time? I think that being price consistent on Vrbo will enable you to maximize revenue on Expedia. Hopefully that's the short answer to your question, Keith. To get more information, I would encourage you to check out the Vrbo Discovery Hub. And if you have an account rep at Vrbo, working directly with them to try to get some clarification on what that means and if you are or are not. But things like Market Maker, Boost, a lot of those tools and features, I believe, are only available to you if you are price consistent. They also encouraged vacation managers to relax fees and cancellation policies. And I would say there's many hoteliers and innkeepers tuned in today's webinar as well, just trying to keep track of what's going on in the vacational space. This is true across all of those things, and it's actually something I've spoke to in many presentations before, and that's to make it easy on someone to do business with you. Your policies should not address the one-off crazy guest scenarios that we all run into from time to time, right? If you created a policy because something happened one time, chances are you don't need that policy. A policy is really around things that are going to happen again and again and again, should not be created around one-time crazy situations with guests. Because if your policies are too aggressive, not just cancellation policies, but other policies as well, if they're too aggressive, you are driving business away from you, and you have no idea that you're driving that business away. The other thing they encourage you to do is to relax the fees. One, make fees understandable, and this statistic came from the Discovery Hub and shocked me, but there are over 8,000 different types of fees on Vrbo, which is whoa, right? I mean, I talked about some fees in the hotel industry, but 8,000 different types of fees on Vrbo, and many of those are probably the same fees with different names, but that's kind of where they're at. It's like, wow, that's a shocking thing. But relax fees and make the fees understandable. If there are fees, let people know what they're paying for. And I know many of you in your markets, you know, we've got customers, and because we've pulled them into our system from an API perspective, but we have, you know, bed taxes, and we have nature fees, and we have, you know, there's all these, you know, crazy fees that even within your local CVB or your local tax authority or whoever might be imposing on you. And then there's the fees that you want to charge to try to pad the revenue that you're making. So there's just a lot going on the fee side of the vacation rental business that we don't typically see on the hotel side. They're also encouraging people to adopt, and I believe this is going to be something you have to do as part of your price consistency. You're going to have to check that because I don't quite remember that piece, but I believe they're going to ask you to adopt Vrbo's standard cancellation policies. That if you want to have listings there, if you want to take bookings, if you want to be distributed, you have to have a standard cancellation policy. They're probably going to offer many different cancellation policies. You know, when I say many, probably 3 to 5, much like Airbnb does, but you have to adopt a standard cancellation policy so the user can get comfortable with that. You won't be able to have a custom cancellation policy. They're also encouraging people to start using virtual tours, that they really want to see more and more of this. I think they had I was surprised, and I can't remember the exact number, so I'm not going to attempt to quote it, but a surprisingly low number of listings on Vrbo had virtual tours as part of their Vrbo listing. They did say that was one of the things they were going to consider to be part of being content complete, which we assume content complete, like it does on other OTAs, will mean that you will rank higher in search results, right? There's many OTAs have like a quality score that you get based on how content complete you are, and I assume they're going to use something like that from a ranking, part of their ranking algorithm. So you can kind of take that to mean that virtual tours may be a part of ranking algorithms going forward. They mentioned specifically Matterport and TruePlace as two Vrbo partners that can do a great job with that. Both of those were at the conference. I know in many of the Rise and Shines, they also talked about an integration with Inside Maps, which is from my understanding, a much less expensive kind of app you can put on your own iPhone and do virtual tours yourself with your own iPhone on a tripod in the property. So much less expensive way to get that done. We have several customers who are experimenting with Inside Maps now. I haven't gotten feedback on them if they're loving it or hating it. If anybody is using any of those three, Matterport, TruePlace, Inside Maps, and has any feedback you want to share in the chat panel, please do so, and I'd be happy to share it with our group here. We are integrated with all three. So if you're a customer of ours and you're wondering which one should I use, please contact your customer success manager. We're happy to share some thoughts with you. But we are integrated with all three of those platforms as well and can pull those into our site for you automatically. So if you're using property management software that we're integrated with, we can pull those in if it's supported via the API for that. Specifically V12 and Escape API, I know right off the hand we're integrated with those and pull all three of those through via those property management software. So that's an important thing to look at, and an important thing as you're thinking about your 2019 and into 2020 marketing plan, you know, something that you may, as you're preparing to talk to your homeowners and go into renewal season with them, might be something that needs to be, you know, into a budget line item, that they would be something your homeowners would be paying for heading into the next year. So what was the big announcement? They kind of teased this out, and I know many of you probably had your home or your Vrbo account manager call you and tell you this ahead of time, so that you weren't surprised by it at the conference or weren't hearing it secondhand. But the big announcement that they made was that Vrbo is eliminating off-platform booking fees. We have customers who spend as much as $50,000 a month in off-platform booking fees, which is just crazy amounts of money in bookings that ultimately book direct, but are technically off-platform bookings that they think they have a right to. And in a fireside chat, John Kim was actually asked, I believe the question was something along the lines of, what was the biggest mistake you feel like you made in the last year? What one thing would you do over if you could? And this is what he referenced. He referenced the decision to charge off-platform booking fees, which had at one point been kind of coined matchback. And there was a tremendous amount of pushback, something we kind of broke the news on in a webinar. Amy Hino broke a lot of news on it as well. But a tremendous amount of pushback across the industry on this. And we are very encouraged to hear that they are rolling that back. I was more than shocked when they rolled it out and questioned the legality of it in a lot of ways. And they backed off of it kind of in stages. You know, they kind of peeled it back a little bit at a time when they realized what they'd kind of stepped in the middle of. But really glad to hear instead of just peeling it back a little bit at a time, that they're peeling it back all the way completely, at least to the best of our understanding. So that's a huge announcement. Hopefully that is going to put a lot of money back in your pocket as a vacation rental manager, back in your homeowners' pockets as well. Appreciate John Kim stepping up and owning that decision that was made and saying, yeah, we blew it here. We made a mistake here and we realized it and we're rolling it back. And I think that's, they'd been through implementation of that. The implementation was done. They were pulling the money in. This was probably pure profit for them. So for them to make that, to peel that back after implementation, after the work had been done, after it was making money for them, is a big deal. And I think for me, that's part of what led me to say at the beginning of our time together that the tone has changed a little bit, that they're not using the power they have and the market size and authority they have to just to pound fees down people's throats. At least I'm hoping that that's true. And I think that them pulling that back is a sign that hopefully they're moving in that direction, and that there was enough pushback from vacation rental managers like you all on today's webinar to kind of challenge them to be better than that and to peel that back. So what wasn't discussed, right? I mean, we get this question a lot, and we're going to touch on it. Neither of these things are things I'm surprised weren't discussed, and honestly, I could have put a lot of things on the slide. I try not to be a sky is falling conspiracy theorist. I try to really stick to the facts of what we know. So I could talk about a lot of things in the conspiracy theorist realm, but for the sake of not stirring drama or stirring the pot, because I don't really lean into that strategy, but these are things that they have specifically talked about in the past, and we know are things have to be addressed in their strategic future. And the first of those is paper booking. And we had many of you who attend our webinars come up to our booth and ask us questions about this at the conference. We know that Okerstrom, the CEO of Expedia Group, is on the record saying he sees the future as a pay-per-booking world. I tried to find the quote for you so that I could have it here, but couldn't track it down in the time I had available. But on an earnings call, maybe a year or two ago, he specifically said that. Now, his position could have changed, but I don't think that's the case. I think that the moves we're seeing them make line up to the fact that that is the case. And if you look at Expedia, the entire group, with the exception Vrbo, is a pay-per-booking world. I can't think of a single other site they have. Now, I know they have hundreds, so I can't realistically make that statement because I haven't been or listed on very many of the hundreds of sites they have. But all of them, to my understanding, except HomeAway, its family of sites, and Vrbo and its group of sites, are pay-per-booking sites that you pay a commission for listing on the site for every single booking that comes through, which helps give them the money to fund what they do on your behalf. So I'm not faulting them for leaning towards a pay-per-booking world. It just leaves you having to answer the question, are you ready for a pay-per-booking world? And we've been asking you all that question for 2 years. I think it was probably 2 years ago that I first said, hey, after that earnings call, you guys need to prepare for this to be the future. I think they have other work they need to get done first. I think they need to get price consistency done first. I think they want to get adoption on Expedia Group more widely established from Vrbo feeding into Expedia. I think they have some other strategic initiatives they're trying to get accomplished, but I think that the writing is still on the wall. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they will switch to a pay-per-booking platform. Hopefully, with what they've committed to as far as telling us that they will make changes, roll those things out slowly and give people time to adopt those changes, that they will do that in a way that you have time to prepare for that from a business strategy perspective. But we don't know. You know, it will just To a certain extent, if they control a significant amount of revenue into your business, they are still the puppet master. Now, how they choose to wield that power is up to them. We are encouraged a little bit by this conference, and hopefully that they're going to be more sensitive in how they wield that power in the future, but they have the power. And then you as a vacation rental manager, and this isn't just true of them, this is true of anywhere you get bookings from. You have to understand the source of your revenue and prepare for it to change, right? And understand, what would I do if this changed? But if they announce tomorrow that they are moving to a pay-per-booking model, what are you going to do? And you need to have those conversations and prepare for that. You know, if it's 8%, 10%, 15%, 20%. I know in the hotel industry that they typically command on average 20% of bookings. In the vacation rental industry, that is a huge chunk of revenue. So you've just got to think about that and know, are you going to try to absorb those fees up to a certain percent and then pass it on to your owners? Are you going to pass 100% of it on to your owners? You need to think about that. And knowing that, is increasing direct bookings something that's important to you? I think Amy Hino posted some interesting data on LinkedIn today. So if you're on LinkedIn, look her up, check that out, specifically about some polling she had done, or her company had done, to vacation managers. So where do you see bookings are growing in the future? And the number one place that vacation managers were confident they were going to increase bookings in the coming years was their own websites, which really gave me a lot of encouragement, right? As a vacation rental manager, or excuse me, vacation rental marketer and hospitality marketer in the hotel and the innkeeping space as well. The vacation rental managers, and as such, I think we would hopefully see similar data from our hoteliers and our innkeepers, that you are more encouraged in leaning into your direct booking strategy more than you ever have. And that's what we do. We stand by our customers and help them build those strategies. And we're going to be teaching webinars throughout the rest of the year, specifically on how to do that and how to do that well to increase your direct bookings. But if that's important to you, to get to a place where you're less dependent or not dependent on any third party, and to be not dependent doesn't mean you get zero bookings from them. So let me clarify on that. I think a lot of people think not dependent on an OTA means you get zero bookings from them. That's not the case at all. I mean, when you look at it, it may be that is a channel of yours, but if they announce tomorrow that they have a 50% pay-per-booking model, you would shut it off immediately. And you could do that because it is a small enough part of your overall bookings, because you get them from somewhere, you get them from other sources as well. So independence means that if someone goes crazy with their terms or price, you can shut it off and your business will continue to operate. And we oftentimes get asked the question, well, what's the right percentage? How many bookings should I be getting from an OTA or from any third party? And the answer is typically for us, less. The answer is you should be working towards less. There's no right percentage for you. It's different for everybody. But if you get 50% of your bookings from Vrbo, set your goal to be 40%. If you get 20% of your bookings from Vrbo, set your goal to be 15% and work towards getting more and more direct bookings over a period of time. The other thing they didn't talk about, and of course I was not surprised they didn't talk about this either, but was a strategic plan to compete with Airbnb. They are getting their butts kicked by Airbnb right now. The entire industry, honestly, is getting their butts kicked by Airbnb right now in ways we didn't foresee, or we knew it was big, but this year has really shaken it up, and they've garnered market share like we haven't seen in past years, this year specifically. But if you just look at this stat, just the average monthly searches for the branded term, so the reason the name is in quotes is because that's the actual search term. Airbnb as a search term has 7.5 million average monthly Google searches. Vrbo has 1.8 million average monthly searches. So I don't know the quick math on that. I think it's basically almost 4x, but Airbnb has 4x the percentage of branded search. Now, Vrbo is still beating them in a lot of organic search, but from a brand awareness perspective, Airbnb is dominating the brand awareness category of this space. And many people believe Airbnb created this sector, when in reality, of course, individual homeowners, individual second homeowners, and then vacation rental managers created the sector years ago. But Airbnb created exposure for the sector in a way that had never been done before. And if you look at where Airbnb's traffic comes from, roughly 80% of their traffic comes from branded search, whereas Vrbo gets a significantly smaller portion of their traffic from branded search. But they also have less traffic in general. So they're getting beat in the United States. They're getting beat in almost every market with, I believe, the exception of like traditional vacational markets, ski and beach markets. I believe Vrbo has an advantage in, and they're getting beat across the world more so than they're getting beat in the United States. So Vrbo has a tremendous amount of work to do while they've got a lot of things going really, really well, and they're insanely profitable. I think it was back in October, or it is October. I think it was back in September, Okerstrom announced that the EBITDA of Vrbo is twice what it was a year ago, meaning they have doubled their profit on that business in a year, which is shocking. A business that large and that mature to double the EBITDA margin or the profit margin on that business in a year, or not just margin, but the total number of the total profit number is insane. How much money they're making off the Vrbo platform. And I think they're just going to keep finding ways to monetize that. I mean, the biggest way they've been able to do that is just by adding that traveler fee, that service fee onto the platform. And I've shared a ton of data in past webinars about how that one change made such a huge impact in their business. But absolutely stunning when you look at the numbers of what Expedia has been able to do since they acquired HomeAway. And that $4 billion acquisition that seems so huge, how they're making that money back so fast and increasing the value of that business so significantly all at once. Absolutely stunning from a case study perspective. Even while Airbnb is dominating them from a market share perspective. So lots of things going, a lot of work that they need to be doing, but still a tremendous success story within Vrbo. And Vrbo, in many ways, has carried Expedia with some of the struggles they've had from an earnings perspective lately. That the Vrbo numbers, if they weren't being rolled up as part of Expedia Group, I think Expedia stock would be struggling in a significant manner if you really get down to some of the raw numbers that you see in their earnings calls and on their statements. So that's what wasn't discussed. Obviously, we've talked about a lot of things, but if you're interested in how we can help you be less dependent on Vrbo, Airbnb, or any other OTA, fill in the blank. That's what we do. So we've given you insight on what's going on, what happened at the conference, some of the takeaways we have. And if you're interested in us partnering with you to be able to help decrease your dependency or reduce your dependency on third-party OTAs, doesn't matter which third-party OTA it is, simply click yes, please get in touch, and a member of our team will follow up with you to schedule some time to do that. We don't care which one it is that you click, but we do ask to get 70% of the people voted just to keep the software working for us and enable us to keep moving things along. So if you're still tuned in, I know we've shared a lot of information. We're going to get to some question and answer time as well. Please vote on that poll. Either click yes, please get in touch, and we'll be happy to follow up with you. Or if you're not interested in us following up on how to create a strategy to reduce dependency on third-party OTAs, no worries, simply click no and we won't get in touch. Or if you're already a customer or already doing that for you, you can click no as well because you've already said yes at a time in the past. So no worries there. Feel free to click no if you're an existing customer. I know many of our existing customers are on today's webinar. So perfect. As that is going and as people are voting in that poll, if you have any questions, please drop those in the chat panel. I have tried to address questions as they've come in, and done our best to try to facilitate those conversations kind of while we were still in the slides. But if you have any questions, be happy to answer those. If you haven't had a chance to vote in the poll, probably means you're not sitting at your computer and you stepped away to get some coffee or maybe a glass of red wine after hearing everything going on. But please click yes or no. Again, we don't care which one you click, but please click one so we can keep that moving forward. One question here in the chat panel, where is RezFest 2020 going to be? And I believe it's been announced. I think it's on their site, so you can verify that. But I believe it's been announced that that's going to be in Orlando, Florida. Seems like they kind of typically bounce between Red Rock in Las Vegas and somewhere in Florida every year. Last year was the JW Marriott in Marco Island. Year before that, I believe it was in Orlando, or 2 years before that, I believe it was in Orlando. And I believe it's going to be in Orlando in 2020 as well. So bouncing between the West Coast and the East Coast there to be able to keep that going and reach people on both sides of the coast. And then VRMA, which we're going to be at next week. And if you're going to be at VRMA, I'd love for you to drop us a message in the chat panel. Love to connect with you while we're there. In New Orleans next week, we're really excited for that opportunity to be there. So I think that's all of the questions in our chat panel. Unless anybody has any more, we are going to close that out here and get to our last slide. If you do have any additional questions, we'd be happy to answer those questions for you. You can also drop me an email at the address on the screen or call me on my direct line, which is also posted there, matt@q4launch.com or 843-475-2962. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure to go and register for our webinar coming up in 2 weeks on how to prepare your 2020 marketing budget, a really important topic for all of you, so make sure you're tuned in for that as you're preparing your 2020 marketing budget. We'll look forward to talking to you then.